I have touched them. The words of the three fingers. As your maiden, allow me to divine them. All that there is came from the one great. Then came fractures, and births, and souls. But the greater will made a mistake. Torment, despair, affliction, every sin, every curse, every one born of the mistake. However ruined this world has become, however mired in torment and despair, life endures. Births continue. There is beauty in that. Is there not? If you would become Lord, do not deny this notion.
The Frenzied Flame represents a force of madness and destruction, both in a literal and symbolic sense. Its influence seeks to overwhelm the mind, erasing individuality and reason through sheer chaos. However, when examined through the game's thematic, textual, and symbolic elements, frenzy is not just an affliction, but a state of mind that stems from an inability to focus and control overwhelming emotions. Overcoming frenzy requires intense discipline, mental clarity, and a form of self-inflicted restriction, most notably represented through the metaphor of vision, blindness, and needles. Unendurable frenzy causes the yellow flame of frenzy to violently burst forth from the caster's eyes. It is the maddening pain and unstoppable tears of those afflicted with the flame of frenzy brought into being. The unstoppable tears come from more than just physical pain. It is an emotional collapse, a descent into madness that cannot be contained. The lightning-like fire is a manifestation of agony, breaking free from within. However, the mind does not break all at once. There is resistance, a battle between reason and chaos. In times past, every single person who attempted to control the flame of frenzy succumbed to madness after a desperate internal struggle. This incantation is a testament to a meager victory. A desperate internal struggle, the very nature of frenzy is an assault on the mind. The phrasing implies that control is possible, but only temporarily. No one has or can master the frenzied flame, only delay the inevitable. Without discipline, without restriction, the mind is overwhelmed. This struggle is central to what it means to resist frenzy. The Lord of Frenzied Flame is described as taking upon themselves all the torment, despair, and afflictions, burning away every sin and every curse. To become the Lord is to embrace suffering and to allow oneself to be consumed by it entirely. This flame does not purify, it annihilates. The Lord of Frenzied Flame shall take their torment, despair, their affliction, every sin, every curse, all melted away. This doesn't represent healing, but the erasure of suffering through the erasure of the self, of life. The individual is lost, dissolved into madness, with nothing left but the chaos of the frenzied flame. To gaze into one another's eyes is truly the most intimate form of human contact. Frenzy spreads through the eyes, making vision the conduit of madness. This presents the idea that the mind's eye, the perception of reality itself, is warped by the frenzy. Just as clarity of thought is needed to resist, exposure to the wrong visions leads to collapse. This is why those who embrace the frenzied flame do not only suffer from madness, they become madness, their very presence spreading it like an infection. Hayeta, a blind woman who fully embraces the frenzied flame, serves as a prime example of submission to madness. Despite her lack of physical sight, she sees through the mind's eye and willingly follows the Three Fingers, accepting their doctrine of total destruction. Her blindness does not protect her from the frenzied flame, rather it signifies her lack of resistance. Unlike others who fight against madness, Hayeta surrenders to it completely, demonstrating that frenzy does not require physical vision to take hold, but only needs a willing mind. And so, Hayeta serves as our maiden, guiding us to the Three Fingers. Just as the Erdtree's light calls the tarnished towards grace, Hayeta's guidance leads us to the depths where the frenzied flame awaits. The Erdtree's radiance, golden and warm, represents divine order, a path to structure and faith. Its light is a beacon, drawing the faithful toward unity. This illumination signifies guidance, a way forward for those who seek purpose and belonging within the order. In stark contrast, the frenzied flame light is not warm, but searing, not gentle, but all-consuming. It does not guide, it overtakes. The frenzied flame does not illuminate the path, it blinds, engulfing the mind in uncontrollable madness. Where the Erdtree's light nurtures faith and obedience, the frenzied flame incites chaos and destruction. Following grace means accepting a place within the order. Following Hayeta means relinquishing all order and embracing chaos.
Go to the door ahead. After divesting yourself of your possessions, it will surely open, and the Three Fingers will welcome you. May the flame of chaos find purchase within you.
Hayeta's role as a guide thus mirrors the Erdtree's function, yet inverts its purpose. She is not a beacon leading to salvation, but a harbinger of ruin, leading the tarnished toward a fate where individuality is lost in the inferno of frenzy. Her guidance does not offer hope or unity, only annihilation. In this way, she embodies the essence of the frenzied flame as its willing instrument, drawing others into the madness she has accepted as her truth. This connection between light, warmth, and guidance extends beyond Hayeta and the Erdtree. Light has always served as a symbol of direction and purpose, a force that leads the lost toward clarity. But sometimes it is ruin. Nanaya's torch. A torch made by attaching a dying flame of frenzy to a small spinal column. In a distant land, in an age-long past, was born a man who failed to become the Lord of Frenzied Flame. All that remains of him is cradled gently by Nanaya. The torch, a tool of illumination, embodies this principle. It dispels darkness, reveals the path ahead, and provides warmth against the cold unknown. In this way, Nanaya's role becomes clear. She was Midra's guiding light, both metaphorically and literally, mirroring Hayeta's role to the tarnished. Nanaya serves as an outside influence, shepherding Midra toward destruction. We can see a similar dynamic play out between Marika and Mesmer.
I will not suffer. A lord devoid of light.
Enough. I have endured more than enough.
No, mother. Forgive me.
I ask you forgive me, dearest Nanaya.
Under the command of Marika, Mesmer is transformed into a symbol of fear and suffers greatly as a result. Then, on a fateful day, he is pushed to the brink and breaks free of her command. Just like Nanaya's words, so too were Marika's words, a curse. Mesmer's armor. Black armor of Mesmer the Impaler. On his mother's wishes, Mesmer made himself a symbol of fear, undertaking the cleansing crusade she desired. Direct thy malediction, thine ire, and thy grief towards me alone. This dynamic, where guiding lights can lead toward chaos, self-destruction, abandonment, and pain, conveys a deeper message. By relying on light from external sources, one risks being misled, used, and ultimately abandoned, left to suffer in the darkness, unable to escape the cave. True liberation lies in turning inward, cultivating not only self-awareness, but also the pursuit of intellectual clarity. It's about questioning the narratives imposed on us, developing critical thought, and kindling the flames of reason and understanding, allowing one to rise above the darkness. Frenzy stands as the antithesis to life and an end to suffering by ending life altogether. For in death there is only peace, for in death there can be no sensation. Midra understands this too well. He has endured more than enough.
Enough. I have endured more than enough.
And so, he too rejects the world as it is. But is it truly mercy to erase everything, or is it simply surrender? There are those who choose another path, a path not of escape, but of endurance, of struggle. To them, pain is not a mistake. It is the crucible of strength, the essence of life itself. Two extremes. One seeks to silence suffering, the other embraces it. But when does endurance become self-destruction? When does mercy become annihilation? To fully understand the relationship between Midra and the Inquisitors, or more broadly, the Hornsent culture, we must first examine the Hornsent religious practices. The Hornsent religious and philosophical beliefs revolve around pursuing purity through refinement, an unending crucible of becoming and evolution, where each encounter serves to hone the self. Whether through the divine warrior trials in combat or the Inquisitor's coercive questioning, every struggle is a means of transformation. This philosophy of refinement through hardship is reflected in every aspect of the Hornsent culture. Find Crucible Feather Talisman. Hornsent view the crucible as sacred for the refinement wrought through its evolutionary gifts, most prominently their tangled horns. Their practices demand strict self-discipline, ascetics loincloth, attire of the Tower's ascetics, embodying their commitment to an austere existence of strict self-control. Curse Blade Cirque. Weapon of the masked curse blades. Circular backhand blade with wave-like cutting edges, sharpened into points that incite blood loss. Long ago, this was employed by the ascetics who strove to become tutelary deities. as a ritualistic object in their self-flagellating dances. For the Haunsent, suffering is not an affliction to be avoided, but a necessary crucible, one that tempers the body, mind, and spirit. Whether through physical trials, ascetic devotion, or the brutal inquisitions of truth, every hardship serves as a means of purification. But the Haunsent didn't stop with the purification of themselves. They sought to use pain and suffering to purify the undesirables of their society. Tooth whip. Whip is strewn with rotten, misshapen teeth, filthy and seething with disease. The teeth are embedded in the whip and dose the victim with deadly poison upon each strike. As the wounds ripen, they grow inflamed and ooze pus. The flesh of shamans was said to melt harmoniously with others. This weapon was not a tool for battle, but a means of breaking and reshaping others through suffering. Its use was justified by their beliefs that through pain, one could be reborn into something greater. The tooth whip skill reveals the true purpose of this weapon, not to kill, but to subdue, break, and control. A chastening whip strike, honed to maximize pain, temporarily reduces the rate at which stamina recovers. Thus, does the pain encourage obedience. This is not the strike of a warrior seeking victory, but of an oppressor seeking submission. The pain it inflicts is deliberate, designed to wear down the will rather than simply the body. By slowing stamina recovery, it weakens resistance over time, ensuring that the victim cannot fight back, cannot endure. It forces them into a state of exhaustion where compliance becomes inevitable. This reflects an aspect of the Haunsent's ideology, that suffering is a path to purification, that pain is not just something to endure, but something to be inflicted, shaping the weak into something stronger through forced refinement. But this is a distortion of resilience. Pain for the sake of pain is not strength, it is control, it is suffering. This ideology reached its extreme in the treatment of the shamans. The Haunsent didn't merely conquer or subjugate them, they sought to forcibly remake them, integrating them into their own perceived path of refinement. To the Haunsent, this was not cruelty, but salvation. By subjecting the shamans and criminals to forced metamorphosis, whether through physical suffering, assimilation, or being placed within the great jars, they believed they were offering them a path to purification. It was a twisted interpretation of the cycle of death and rebirth taken into the hands of mortal men. One where suffering was not just a necessity, but a sacred obligation, where the shamans were forcibly broken and reshaped in the name of refinement. Alexander, the warrior jar, embraced struggle on his own terms. His journey was one of transformation, but unlike the shamans, he chose his path. He sought out battles, not as a means of destruction, but as a means of growth, pushing himself to his limits to become something greater. Alexander's jarring was not forced upon him, nor was it an instrument of suffering. It was a crucible of self-betterment. This stands in stark contrast to the shamans, who were thrown into jars against their will, their suffering dictated by others, The Haunted viewed pain as a path to refinement, but their methods twisted it into oppression. Alexander, by contrast, found strength through his own will, proving that refinement does not come from inflicted suffering, but from chosen endurance. In this way, Alexander represents the virtuous version of what happened to the shamans. Where they were shattered and reforged by others, he reforged himself. His journey was not one of subjugation, but of self-mastery, demonstrating that the path to strength lies not in being broken, but rising after every fall. Like a cracked pot that mends itself when shattered, Alexander endures and becomes stronger with every hardship. Cracked pot. This empty pot somehow mends itself when broken. Essential vessel for crafting cracked pot items. The shamans were thrown into jars as a punishment, their suffering dictated by others. But Alexander, a great jar, was not a vessel for torment. He was a vessel for strength. He was not shattered to be discarded, but to be reforged, proving that true resilience is not found in suffering alone, but in the ability to rebuild oneself again and again. The Haunted, in their fervor to refine and uplift, crossed a dangerous line. They no longer merely endured suffering, they inflicted it upon others, believing it was their right, even their duty, to force this path upon others they saw as impure. This is the philosophy that Midra rejected and why he and his followers were deemed heretics. This was not a threat, but a warning. They did not seek to spread the frenzy. The spirit isn't being coy. The Haunted would have known that the frenzy was forbidden, so why ask what crime had Midra committed? Because there was none. His only heresy was his rejection of the suffering. He sought an end to the brutal trials of his kin, a way forward beyond torment. For that, the Inquisition was set upon him. Hunted, condemned, and offered only cruelty, Midra and his followers were driven to the very thing they had once feared. Neither he or his disciple had embraced the Frenzied Flame until they had no choice. Mad in hand, a glove stitched together from the flayed skin of the victims of a butcherous bloodbath, forged of an unyielding black impulse toward revenge fostered in those who were hunted down as heretics by their own brethren. These are the weapons of the utterly downtrodden. This is not simply a weapon, it is a testament to what happened to Midra's followers. The wording is clear. They were hunted down and butchered by their own kind. The Inquisition was not an act of simple questioning, it was a bloodbath. And in the wake of that slaughter, something else took root, an unyielding black impulse toward revenge. The massacre of his followers births the Madden Hands, which are not simply driven by ideology, but by an impulse for revenge, a raw emotional backlash against oppression. This reflects how trauma, when not processed or endured healthily, can turn into destructive cycles of retaliation. This cycle of revenge mirrors Edgar's own pursuit of vengeance.
I'll find them. The foul wretches responsible for this. I'll hunt them down and exterminate every last one of them. Rest assured, Arena, it will be done.
While Edgar himself is an oppressor, the misbegotten rise against him in retaliation, only for Edgar to seek retribution in turn. An endless chain of suffering, driven by the same forces that shape the Madden Hands. Grafted Blade Greatsword. The storied sword of Castle Morn, a revenger's weapon. It is burdened by oceans of anger and regret. A lone surviving champion from a country now vanished was so determined to continue fighting that he claimed the sword of an entire clan of warriors. This is the grim fate that befalls those trapped in cycles of suffering and retribution. Midra's defiance of his people's cruel traditions was met with merciless persecution, and in turn, his followers, consumed by their anguish, gave birth to the Madden Hands, a manifestation of vengeance so absolute they turned it into a weapon. The tragedy of Midra's followers is not just in their pain, but in what their pain became. This story serves as a warning. When oppression is met with unchecked retaliation, suffering does not end. It is reborn, transformed, and passed down. Edgar's own descent into revenge mirrors this truth, proving that without breaking the wheel, there can be no peace, only the endless forging of new weapons burdened with anger and regret. The Hornsent sought to purify Midra's followers, to force them back into their way of life through suffering. Instead, they created something far worse. What was once a rejection of suffering became an uncontrollable, frenzied rage. The philosophy of the Hornsent dictated that hardship refined the soul. But what happens when hardship is unbearable, when suffering is pushed beyond endurance? The answer is frenzy. Midra and his followers only sought to put an end to the pain-focused practices of their culture. But the dogmatic teachings of the Hornsent had him branded as a heretic. If part of the sacred crucible is pain, how dare he question it? Just as Goldmask lamented, it is easy for learning and learnedness to be reduced to the ravings of fanatics. At its core, this conflict is more than just religious persecution. It is the culmination of a fundamental philosophical disagreement. Midra, who was hunted by the Inquisitors, bears a name that strikingly parallels the Jewish word midrash, meaning textual interpretation, study, or exegesis. In the Talmudic tradition, midrash is not just an act of reading, but of questioning, reinterpreting, and challenging established meanings. This connection is significant. The Inquisitors represent rigid dogma, the belief that suffering is sacred and unquestionable. But Midra, in his very essence, represents exegesis, the act of interpreting, reevaluating, and challenging what is deemed sacred. His existence is a threat not because he wields power, but because he dares to ask, must suffering be a path to purity? To fully grasp the weight of this philosophical divide, it helps to understand the nature of exegesis itself. What is an exegesis example? The process of exegesis can be applied to any form of written text, including fiction and non-fiction. A theoretical example of exegesis would be to examine an ancient Greek play and use the process of exegesis to uncover its true meaning. This may involve looking at the author's context and the various literary elements used in the play. It could also include exploring the play's connection to other works of literature from the same period. Exegesis is a means of uncovering deeper truths by reinterpreting foundational texts, while aporia, a related concept in philosophy, deals with uncertainty and doubt. Aporia challenges assumed knowledge, exposing contradictions and forcing reevaluation. Interestingly, exegesis is often used as a method to explore aporia, meaning the two are intertwined. This is precisely what Midra represents, an aporia within the Haunt's faith. He embodies the moment of doubt, the contradiction that cannot be ignored, and the Inquisitors, acting as enforcers of dogma, seek to erase that doubt before it spreads. Thus, the conflict between Midra and the Haunted is not just about religious doctrine. It is a war between rigid belief and interpretative thought, between unquestioned adherence and the pursuit of deeper understanding. Frenzy is not mere madness. It's the culmination of pain left to fester, a fire that consumes reason and selfhood alike. Those afflicted by frenzy are not simply insane, but are caught in an emotional abyss. Their will hijacked by anguish that offers no path forward, fated to destruction. Overcoming frenzy is not about mere resistance, but about understanding, tempering, and ultimately transcending the forces that drive one toward ruin. Miquella's Needle. One of the unalloyed gold needles that Miquella crafted to ward away the meddling of outer gods, capable of subduing the flame of frenzy if inherited, allowing one to cheat fate and avoid becoming Lord of the Frenzied Flame. However, the needle is yet unfinished and can only be used in the heart of the storm beyond time, said to be found in Farum Azula. The phrase, the eye of the needle, is a well-known metaphor for precision, transformation, and discipline. To pass through the metaphorical needle's eye, one must strip away excess distractions and emotional disturbances, reinforcing the need for clarity and purification. This directly opposes the nature of frenzy. In this context, piercing the eye with Miquella's needle represents threading the needle of control, narrowing one's perception to a singular point of focus in order to resist the madness. The description of Miquella's needle states, it allows one to cheat fate and avoid becoming the Lord of Frenzied Flame, and that it can only be used in the heart of the storm beyond time in Farum Azula. This suggests that fate in this case is not an external cosmic decree, but an inevitability caused by losing oneself to overwhelming emotions. The Lord of Frenzied Flame is not chosen rationally. Rather, those who inherit the flame do so because they are consumed by their suffering, unable to control or redirect their despair. To cheat fate is to resist the emotional forces that would otherwise lead one down that path. This aligns with how the game presents frenzy as the ultimate loss of control, a surrender to madness that strips away individuality.
Oh my. Why the long face? I fear that you were previously acquainted with this vessel. Well, that is most unfortunate. For he is dead. As for his flesh, he gave it to me. Shabriri.
The heart of the storm beyond time, then, represents a place of stillness amid chaos, a point where one can momentarily step outside the relentless pull of fate and choose a different path. This idea is reinforced by Farum Azula itself being described as beyond time and tied to the ancient dragon lord Placidusax. The ancient dragons wield storms, which symbolize raw emotions, wild, untamed, and destructive when left uncontrolled. However, despite dwelling in the heart of the storm, Placidusax remained still, his very name meaning calm boulderstone, an unshakable presence amidst the chaos. His seat, said to exist beyond time, aligns with the idea that to master one's emotions, one must exist in the present, neither dwelling on the past or anxiously anticipating the future. The storm is not the enemy. To be caught in it is to be consumed, but to command it is to master oneself. This is the lesson of the ancient dragons. They do not suppress the storm, nor do they surrender to it. They wield it. True resilience is not found in denying emotions, but in understanding them, its power, and directing them without being ruled by them. This connection is further emphasized by the description of the ancient dragon smithing stone, which states, "The ancient dragon lord's seat is said to lie beyond time. This stone lightly twists time." The twisting time of Fa Missoula is not just a literal distortion, but a metaphor for stillness, the ability to step outside the rush of events and remain fully present. In contrast, frenzy represents the complete loss of control, a state where one is ruled by overwhelming emotions rather than mastering them. Just as the storm rages around Placidusax while he remains calm, resisting frenzy requires inner stillness amid the chaos. Thus, the ancient dragons embody a stoic ideal, not rejecting emotion, but controlling its power rather than being consumed by it. By achieving this balance, one can resist the pull of frenzy, cheating fate. By not being ruled by the strong emotions brought on by suffering and hardship. The answer to frenzy is not to fight the storm head on, but to become like Placidusax, centered, present, and unshaken. Frenzy does not take hold immediately. It spreads when defenses, both physical and mental, are broken. Just as armor shields a body and stone scales shield the dragons, these minds must be shielded against despair and unrestrained emotion. Those who fail to maintain these defenses are consumed, whether by madness, vengeance, or death. The ancient dragons understood this well. Their stone scales acted as both a physical and symbolic barrier, protecting them from corruption. These scales were not just armor, but a reflection of their endurance, their resistance against outside forces. Dragon Crest's Great Shield Talisman. The ancient dragons, who ruled in the prehistoric era before the Erdtree, would protect their lord as a wall of living rock. And so it is that the shape of the dragon has become symbolic of all manner of protections. But Fortisax lacked or lost these scales, leaving them vulnerable to deathblight. After Godwyn the Golden became the Prince of Death, the ancient dragon fought long and hard against the death within its companion. Alas, victory was never achieved, and its only reward was corruption. The loss of their barrier led to their downfall. They fought against death, but without protection, they too were consumed by it. A similar struggle is seen in Vike, the Tarnished, who came closest to becoming Elden Lord before succumbing to the Frenzied Flame. His armor, though scorched, acted as a shield, a last defense against madness. Iron armor singed and blistered by fingers. No other Tarnished was closer to the throne of Elden Lord than Vike. But without announcement, Vike traveled far below the capital and was scorched by the flame of frenzy. His armor resisted, but it was not enough. and when the player seeks the three fingers, they must remove their armor to fully embrace the frenzy.
Go to the door ahead. After divesting yourself of your possessions, it will surely open, and the three fingers will welcome you.
The implication is clear. Frenzy requires complete surrender, an abandonment of all defenses, all restraints. But where frenzy spreads through surrender, its cure lies in resilience. Just as the Tarnished must journey to Far Missoula, the domain of the ancient dragons, to rid themselves of the Frenzied Flame, Reich was once loved by an ancient dragon. This suggests that the dragon's stoicism, their ability to endure without succumbing, is the true answer to frenzy. Midra's giant needle, the sword of damnation, is not unlike Miquella's needle. Both act as restraints, halting the spread of frenzy, yet neither offers true freedom. Just as Miquella's needle suppresses frenzy without removing its presence, the sword of damnation is a symbol of suppression, not mastery. It is a barrier, but barriers alone do not lead to control. They only delay the inevitable. Had Midra's followers endured without losing themselves to vengeance, their fate may have been different. Instead, they were caught in the same cycle as Edgar, who sought revenge for his daughter's murder, just as the misbegotten sought revenge against him. This endless chain of suffering mirrors how frenzy spreads through despair, retaliation, and the loss of all restraint. Both frenzy and vengeance thrive where suffering is unchecked and defenses are broken. Those who have lost everything, who have no barriers left, become susceptible to forces beyond their control, whether it be death, madness, or the cycle of revenge. The lesson is clear. To overcome frenzy, one must endure without surrendering to it. To lose oneself in vengeance or despair is to become a part of the cycle, to be consumed by it. Whether it's Midra's followers, the nomadic merchants, or Fortisacs, the pattern remains the same. Without protection, without resilience, corruption will take root. If surrendering to madness, vengeance, or despair leads to destruction, then the answer must lie in resilience, in standing firm against the ocean of suffering without letting it define or consume you. True strength is not found in retaliation, nor in blind suppression of emotions, but in learning to endure without losing oneself. The ancient dragons, despite their flaws, teach a vital lesson. Protection is not just about armor, but about resilience. Fortisacs fell because they lacked stone scales, but those who keep their defenses, who do not allow them to be broken down by suffering, can stand firm. In the same way, those who resist frenzy, who refuse to be consumed by vengeance, can find another path. Not one of suppression, but of mastery over emotion, of enduring suffering and hardship without becoming it. This is the way forward, not to be ruled by pain, but to rise above it. Thank you for watching the video. Like, comment, and subscribe.